Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. I'm joined with Mike Brennan, who's an artist and an author, and all kinds of other stuff that we're going to talk about. So, Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely, Dan. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. We had originally connected several years ago at an event up in my old hometown of Pennsylvania with Justin Schenck, where you were there doing live sketches. And then, after the event, one of us, I don't remember if you sent me a friend request or I sent you a friend request, but kind of that, obligatory, friend request after you connect with somebody at an event
Yeah.
and you just kind of follow each other on social media. And then you know, we, we reconnected just a few months ago at another mutual connection of ours, Terry Weaver's event, The Thing in Orlando. And we kind of rekindled our relationship with after the first session, me coming up to you and saying, "Hey, where they're serving lunch at?"
Yes.
And
The
from
important
there,
questions.
exactly. And then from there, it was just, hanging out a little bit over the weekend. So, before we get started in the conversation, though, just, introduce yourself to the listeners. Who is Mike Brennan today?
Yes. Ooh, the ominous question. Uh, the way I say it is that I am a creator and communicator who tells stories on pages and stages. And then people go, okay, that's cool. That sounds nice. But what does that actually mean? Right. And so on the creator side, my background is graphic design. I'm classically trained in that and spent many years in corporations, mom and pop shops. I've done the whole thing and still continue to do design today for private clients. And then that kind of branched out into some other visual art where I do some pop culture themed art, digital paintings, mixed media type of work. And a lot of it based on honestly just my experiences and me then translating that into art and sharing that for somebody else for them to then have an experience themselves. So that's kind of on the creator side. And the communicator side, I'm a speaker. I speak on creativity and fun and mental health and a bunch of other things that kind of at the crossroads of all those things, really with the goal of helping other people embrace their creativity, to have a more specific, intentional, and purposeful experience around creativity. Because I believe that when somebody taps into that for themselves, they create things that they dream up, they get it out into the world. Like not only do they win, but the people around them win. And so I've seen the power of that in my life, and I want to see that happen for as many other people as possible. So, along with that, on the communicator side, I have a podcast as well called Creative Chats, where I talk about creativity with all sorts of people and just create resources like books and programs, and again, helping people embrace their creativity and thrive.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So, at what point in your life did you embrace your own creativity?
Pretty young. Some of my earliest memories were around me. I loved cartoons. That was my world. And so I'd probably spend way too much time in front of the TV watching cartoons. Also, kind of looking at comic strips. And that stuff informed my world earlier. And so I started going, I want to learn how to draw these characters. And so it would be, like Hagar the Horrible and Snoopy and Peanuts and Bloom County, Opus the Penguin, and all these different characters that I grew to love. And then I would create like greeting cards out of that kind of things because it was like, hey, this is what's important to me. I'm going to make some art around this. And then I would give it to family members or somebody, and I'd see their face light up, and they'd be like, "You made this for me?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like, and then they'd hang it up on the fridge, and there was this moment of like, oh, this is something here. Like this makes me feel good. It makes them feel good. Like there's an exchange that happens. And so looking back on that later on, because obviously when you're like, 5 or 6 years old, you're not thinking that way. But
Right.
looking back, I realized like, oh, there's an exchange that happens that I want to be a part of, like for the rest of my life, where I can create something and have it impact somebody else's life.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. At what point in your life did you really grasp the point that your passion could be a vocation?
Well, I'm stubborn, and I say that because as I was in high school, I took more and more art classes, and I had the conversation that many parents fear when their kid is interested in art, and it's, I want to go to art school. And you know, my parents were kind of like, I think the immediate reaction was like, we don't want you to be the starving artist. Please become a doctor or a lawyer or something that makes money, right? Which I get, I understand the concerns, but I think when they realized that I wasn't going to budge on that, this was really something I wanted to do. The happy medium was design, because they're like, at least that's commercially viable. You can work in a business. You won't have to be like on a street corner trying to sell paintings. Like you'll have health insurance, all those kind of things. So I think I that was really the point at which it became serious. And I can't say that I really knew anyone in my life that was pursuing art, even design necessarily, to model that for me. It was just more of other people telling me, the high school counselor, career track people were telling me this is an option. Me knowing that there were art schools and other people that I had known who had gone there. So that started to inform me to go, this could actually be something that you pursue for your career path.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I kind of think back and look at my own, creativity with writing, because a lot of people say to me, how long have you been writing? And it's like, well, literally my entire life. Like it was just something I loved doing, even as a young boy. Like I remember, um, you know, we actually lived in Florida for about 4 years right after my mom and dad got divorced, and when my brother got out of the army, he moved down here, and he uh, he was playing on an adult soccer team, and I started writing this weekly newsletter about his soccer team and the league, and handing it out to the players and their wives and girlfriends and stuff on the sidelines each week, and it was just pretty cool. And it was funny. Last time we were in Pennsylvania, my somehow my brother still had copies of the Melbourne United Post, and
Nice.
we were we were just going through them and reminiscing. But even when I first, when I published my first book in 2012, though, I never thought that, I was still working, um, and didn't really consider myself an author, like per se. And then when I started getting this calling to hit the road and to start writing more, is when I think I finally, you know, really started to embrace um, the fact that that's what I am. That
Yeah.
I am a writer, I am an author. 4 books published now. Um, but I guess I suffered from imposter syndrome for
Hmm.
quite some time.
Yeah.
Is that something that you went through in the early days
Oh
before
yeah.
you embraced it? So how did
Yeah.
you get over that?
It wasn't just the early days, because I think when you when you don't know what you don't know, it's easier to keep that at bay. And then when you get all of a sudden in the midst of, like for me, art school, it was, oh, the people around me are really super talented, and this is like the top people are here, and I made it in, but surely I must be towards the bottom of that top, right? So, um, there's that, and then you kind of find your way and you go, okay, you're going to graduate, you're going to get a job, all that kind of stuff. And so for me, it was really more imposter syndrome around a different type of art. It wasn't design, it was really more my drawing and the digital painting, fine art, illustration side of things. And because I struggled so much with like, what was championed was this style that's called photorealism, which basically means something is so highly rendered it looks like a photo. And while I came close to some things in some projects, it always was a frustrating thing for me because it was super controlled, hyper focused. Like it was more pain than pleasure. And the end result was always like this. Yeah, it's okay, or it's good here, but it always seemed to miss the mark. And so because of that, I told myself I couldn't be a quote real artist. I could be a designer, sure, I could pick fonts and colors and do all that kind of stuff, layouts. But when it came to being a real artist, I couldn't do that because I struggled with, perfect proportions, or I struggled with the rendering, or I struggled with whatever components that I had set out as a benchmark of like, that's what success looks like. And honestly, I lived in that space for a really long time. And I always felt like what I'm doing in that, whenever I would do it, like even for just myself, I was like, this isn't good enough. I'm not good enough in this. So I'll keep playing around with it, but surely there's nothing that's ever going to come of this. And it wasn't until years and years later where I was at this kind of rock bottom moment in some things, and I started re-questioning and opening things up again, and saying like, what if the rules that I attached to this, I just threw those away too, and just said, what could this look like? And what is it about what I do that is actually like, that I like, that's redeemable? And I figured out that I'm a mess in some things, and a lot of things, unfortunately. But I like messy things. I like the splatter marks. I like loose lines and bold colors. And it wasn't until I realized those things, and then not just realized it, but then embraced it and went, okay, I'm going to go all in on that stuff. That's when I found a certain freedom that said, oh, this is more aligned with who I am and how I do things, instead of me trying to be somebody that I'm not, or falling into the comparison trap again and again and again. So it was this embracing. And then I think it was a continual, and to this day, whenever there's something new that I'm doing, there's always that voice of imposter syndrome. Who do you think you are to do this? Or oh, this is going to fail, or what? And I think it's this, you acknowledge it and you say, okay, I'm hearing that. I'm not just trying to like bury my head and pretend that that's not there. So I'll address it, but almost like it's this outside entity that says, thanks for your concern. I appreciate it. I know you're trying to keep me safe, but I'm not listening to you right now because I have things to do. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do what I need to do, and just continually trying to disengage with that instead of feeding that. That's what I've found has been helpful as that continues to come up every so often.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it's something that you never do quite get over. It's a constant battle to, feel like, okay, I do belong here, you know. Um, but
Yeah.
it is interesting to understand your process of overcoming that. And I don't know that that's solely with creatives. I mean, I think that's, everybody I think suffers from
Yeah.
imposter syndrome at one point or another in their
Yeah.
life. And I think you and I had the conversation when we were together at the thing when I was talking about Rick Rubin, the record producer, where
Yes.
um, he once said about, what he stresses to creatives is that to get them in a mindset of creating stuff that they love, not
Hmm.
creating something that they think is going to be successful commercially, that's going to sell, that other people are going to like. It's like create it for yourself first. And if other people love it because you put your heart out there on the line, that's great. And if they don't, that's okay too, because you still created something that you love and something that you wanted to create. And that helped me a lot just because, a lot of times again, because you do have that, starving artist, starving artist, starving author, starving fill in the blank, you know, in the back of your mind that it's like I need, I need to sell books. I need to sell my art. I need to sell whatever because I need to put gas in the tank and I need to pay rent and I need to, eat and all that sort of stuff. So there is kind of that fine balance, as well. Um, but I think if you do just get to a point where you're creating for yourself and you're truly authentic, that the other results will you know, will follow. So, is there anything that you can add to that theory?
Yeah, I think you're right in that it's a yes and, because that statement from Rick Rubin isolated could seem very much like a, well, of course he's going to say that. I mean, look at the success he's had. Look at
Right.
the success of the, there's a certain amount of privilege that
Yeah,
comes
it's
along
it's
with
e-
saying
it's
that,
easy
right?
to say that when you got 50 million in your bank account.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Um, but there is merit to what he's saying. I think there are caveats though, because I know a lot of people who are creating things that they love and that they're passionate about, but that's not connecting with an audience and is not selling and is not generating any income. That's a neutral statement. That's not bad or good. That is what that is. Where it becomes a good or bad thing is when, if I'm trying to make a livelihood of this and then it doesn't connect, then it becomes a frustration point, and it becomes something that is introduces doubt, introduces a lot more frustration into the process and the journey, and um, there's a disconnect that I think can really sideline a lot of creative people. And it's understanding that, yes, the important reason why you should be creating work that speaks to you is because the more that you know yourself, the more that you understand why you create, what's underneath what you create, the better that you're going to be at showing up like that authentically. And I think that's where that statement really is putting the focus, is when people show up authentically and they're creating from that place, it's attractive for people. We recognize that in other people. And there's something about that we go, oh, yes, like that's something I want to be around. That's someone I want to be around, versus chasing things because we feel like it's going to sell because it's what's in the market. Things that, well, this other person does this style, so maybe I just adopt that style, and I do some stuff like that too. That may generate the income, but there's not ever going to be that place where you dig deeper to know yourself, to get aligned, to get clarity, to truly operate out of the place of like, why am I here? Like, what am I supposed to be doing with my time on this planet? And how do I create things that actually make an impact on my life and the people around me, as opposed to just copying, as opposed to just getting by, as opposed to just making a buck? And it's examining your motivations. It's examining your work, and again, the why underneath your work. And so the reason why I say that's a yes and to what he was talking about there is because I think it's, yes, we need to do that work. It's important because it's knowing ourselves and being aligned and being authentic. And it is also knowing where that intersects in the marketplace. If selling, right, if making a money is one of our goals, and understanding how we can overlap that so that what we create speaks to us, but then it also speaks to somebody else and they see and it meets a need for them. That's an important thing to think about and process and figure out how to navigate. And then there's also the piece of it that goes, I think everybody should have something that is just theirs creatively. Like, I'm not trying to sell this. I'm not trying to market this. I'm not trying to do anything else with this other than the reward is in me creating this. And that I need that. It's not touched by outside voices or budgets or constraints. This is a place for me to do what it is that makes me happy. And that is the value, as opposed to everything always pushing towards a side hustle, or how can I monetize everything I create, or all those kind of things. So, yes, we need those things to sell and to make a living and to be able to pay the bills and all that. But then also we need that place where something is protected and untouched and it's just ours, so that it continues to stoke those fires for who we are as creative people.
Yeah, I love that. So, what is your why as to why you create?
My why is really to connect with people. It is to have an experience, to create something that's meaningful to me, and then bring it to somebody else. And my art and my creativity doesn't feel complete in the creation process unless those two things are there, creating and connecting. And it's the connecting that is really the thing that lights me up, because I've had to learn this the hard way. When I was in a place where I was in my cave, so to speak, right, creating, and didn't get to interact with someone who was the recipient of what I created, it felt empty. I didn't know if what I created actually was making an impact. And that was important to me. So, for instance, in some of the design places that I worked, some of those positions, I would be creating, and then there'd be a deadline, and we'd ship it out the door, and then we're on to the next thing. And I never got to see someone open a magazine and look at my layout or interact with what it is that I created. And so I didn't know if really what I was doing was making an impact, had any value or purpose, really. And so I realized, oh, those two pieces are important for me. And what I create is actually the vehicle that helps me connect. And that vehicle can change from time to time. So in one instance, it might be a piece of visual art. Another time, it might be something that's written word. Another time, it could be my podcast. Another time, it could be me on a stage speaking. Another time, it could be, like all these different things, these pieces, these creative expressions that I have. Instead of them being at war with each other, they're now tools in the toolbox to go, what's the appropriate form to make the best connection? Because I know that now I can do that with intention and purpose.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, again, something I talked about when I was on stage at the thing was you hear so many people talk about, you need to have a niche, you need to have a
Mm-hmm.
niche. And, um, like I had a publisher tell me one time that my books were, you know, not related enough to create a niche. But yet, like you just said, for me, the niche is that connection. Like that's what it
Yep.
is. It's not, so, people could say, well, to you, are you an author? Are you an artist? Are you a speaker? Like, what's your lane? But I think for you, it comes back again to the connection and you're using those tools. So, you know, when when you hear people use that term, as to like, dial in, how do you respond to that?
I understand their concern, and typically I'm asking questions internally of, okay, why is this person pushing on this? And there may be a couple of reasons. The first thing is I think it's easier for people to put you in a category and to know what to do with you and what you create if you are singular in focus and you people understand, okay, you do X, I need X, great, no problem. Very clear path. The problem is that not everyone is wired to be that hyper focused. Not everybody is interested in just being singular in that focus because they have other things they want to do. The danger becomes one of two things. The people who are saying niche down, sometimes, many times, it's coming from more of a question of how do we market you? And they're thinking more in terms of the business side of like, okay, well, here's the formula, here's what you're supposed to do, here's what the industry standard is, et cetera, et cetera. And then they're going, well, now we need to fit you into this so that we can sell you, so that we can sell your work, so that we can make some money, so that we have a bottom line, like all that stuff. And I understand it again, and that's part of it. And you kind of have to figure out how to navigate through that. But that could trample on something that for someone who has multiple things they want to do, could either block them from ever doing those things, or somehow, if there's someone who's seeking permission, that could sideline them to go, oh, see, I don't have the permission to go and create these things, and then they miss out. Everybody else misses out. Um, but I will say also that there is, and I say this speaking from experience of because I have many different things that I do, it has been at times hard for people to go like, wait, what do you do? Like, what? How am I remembering you? Like, what's
Right.
the connection point? And from a business side, making the just the having the pitfalls, I guess you could say, of trying to build several of those things simultaneously. And a friend said it once best, I think, when he said, it's not that you can't do these things. They're not just, exclusive, but it's hard to do it simultaneously, you know, um, because then it's almost like building separate businesses all at the same time, and you're spinning plates. You're running from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and you're not allowing anything to really get off the ground enough where you can then go, okay, that's stable. Let me then move into something else. So And I think that's something that somebody has to figure out for themselves, unfortunately. Again, I've had a lot of pitfalls in that area of people saying like, I love you, Mike, but I don't know how to recommend you. Like, I don't know what to do with you necessarily. I don't know where there may be a connection with the people I know who need what you do, but I'm just not, it's not clear enough. So clarity, alignment, those things are really important. But at the same time, I don't think that should block you from um, feeling like you have to niche down so much that you end up frustrating yourself and excluding things that really you should be doing.
Yeah, I love that. So again, as a creative and as someone who, you know, is using their creativity to, create connections and be able to create people, connect with people um, at a
I've
human
created some
level.
people too. I have two
Yeah,
daughters.
yeah, there you go. Um, but someone who, like me, it is that connection. Again, us traveling, it's all about the connection. Um, you know, Yet one of the things that, you know, I heard a lot of during the thing that we had attended together was AI and, using AI to your advantage. Um, and as a creative, like I struggle with that as someone who's, really thrives on human connection. Like it's it's a spot that I have not leaped into yet. I do understand that there's probably a balance that can be worked with as a creative and AI. How do you navigate that balance between, you know, being a creative, thriving on human connection, and this, you know, furious, fast-paced um, AI world that we're heading into? I mean, just how AI has changed from where you and I are talking today to that conference in November of 2024
Yeah.
is like decades apart in just a few months. So how do you balance that as a creative?
I try to look at it as a tool and to identify where are the areas it can help me either reduce some friction someplace, help me to get to an end result quicker in something that I don't need to take as much time or don't want to take as much time so that I can spend my time doing the things that are really more in my sweet spot. And what I mean by that is like there are a few places where very specifically I lean on AI driven tools. One is even with my podcast. So I just recently started using the service called Riverside. And Riverside, I kind of resisted for a little while and finally jumped in. And I'm like, okay, this is helping me because there's video, there's a transcript. You can kind of edit the video by looking at the transcript. It's an easier, cleaner process for me to be able to get in there to do something and get the end result of what I need because I don't need to be spending my time being the video editor and all these, the minutia of things, nor can I afford right now to hire somebody to do that for me. So I kind of was in the place where I have to do this for myself if I want to continue to do this. But those are areas where it was stealing time, attention, energy. And if I can leverage a tool like that to be able to get to the end result faster and better, then why not? Right now, I know that's kind of it can be a touchy thing because then it also is like, well, what about the people who do that for a living? What about the, all the what ifs stuff? And I'm like, I get it, and those are valid. And believe me, when it comes to the visual art stuff and a lot of how AI stuff has ripped off other artists and all that, like I totally understand and I totally am against that too. But I do think, to your point, there is a balance to be found, and I do think it's trying to figure out, okay, it is here. It's a part of things. It's not going away. If anything, like you said, it's getting more and more a part of everyday life. And so either make friends with it and figure out how to leverage it for your purposes ethically, or the other thing you can do is just bury your head in the sand, ignore it, or be the mob with the pitchforks and say like, no, the monster's here, And I don't think any of that stuff is really helpful because it doesn't, it ends up putting you in a place where you end up behind, way behind the change. And I've seen this happen in even other industries of things where people resist change. People resist something that seems scary, and then they get left behind. And then either maybe a whole industry goes away, and then they find themselves where they're like, okay, I've resisted. The world around me has changed. Now what do I do? Now I feel completely lost. And so I think it's far better to be a part of the conversation, ask questions, be ethical, push back, try things, figure out what makes sense for you specifically, and leverage those tools so that more of your time, energy, and effort can be spent doing the things of what you really should be doing. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of the way I've tiptoed into it as well. I mean, just, since the thing, I've started using Opus Clip with my podcast to create clips to, get segments out of the podcast to increase listenership and get people to, drive people to the podcast more. I did actually look at Riverside, but because of honestly, just because of how long my Zoom subscription was still at.
Yeah.
I decided to go with Opus Clip first, and
Yep.
who knows, maybe in a year I'll shift that because I have heard some good things about that as well. But yeah, I think you're right. It's just a matter of kind of tiptoeing in and figuring out how can I leverage it um, to my advantage. So you definitely don't want to end up like Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah.
They really should have been the first Amazon or the Amazon. Like they had it there with the Sears catalog and mail order way ahead of that, and then they kind of resisted it, and all of a sudden they're not here anymore. So yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, it's here. So figure out how to coexist with it for sure. Just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about your live sketches because again, that's really how
Mhm.
we initially connected. And I think it's something that is, so cool that you do, where, just for the listeners to understand, you'll go into an event and just, sketch things that are happening at that event in real time. And again, that's where you and I first connected at Justin's event. And then, that's what you're doing at the thing as well, in addition to speaking. But how did that start? Like, how did that become, a thing? Because, like I said, it's very, very cool. I love the fact, and I was honored to be, one of your muses when when I was on stage. Like I've sent that picture to so many of my friends and family. Like, hey, check this out. I'm a cartoon now.
Awesome. Yeah, like many things, it was accidental. I was I was uh, I was at a an event actually here in Tennessee and Nashville area. This is probably 2015, I think. And I was at this event and I didn't know anybody. And so I'm kind of like a half introvert, half extrovert. When I'm in a room full of people I know no one, I feel very introverted and I'm like, okay, like I don't know what to do with myself. I feel real awkward and I wish it wasn't like this, but it is. So what ended up happening is that I found that if I had my iPad and I started just drawing some stuff, that it kind of relaxed me a little bit. And then an interesting byproduct of that was people started coming over and going like, "What are you doing? What are you drawing?" Like, "Oh, that's cool." And then conversations happen. And I was like, that's interesting. And then I leaned in further and I was like, okay, let me do now as people are on stage and doing whatever. And I'm just doing this for myself, um, and helping me focus and so on and so forth. And then I started sharing them as I was at the event. And some people there at the event, this one guy in particular, he was offering like 15 minutes of free business advice. So I thought, okay, I'm at a crossroads where I need to figure some things out. Let me go sit with this guy for 15 minutes. So he knew what I was doing in the sketching thing, and he says, that's a business. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't see it that way. I was just like,
Right.
this is something I quote just do, right?
Yeah, I'm
Because
just
we're so,
sketching.
yeah, like because we're so close to the things that we do sometimes that we don't see what other people see. We don't see the value that other people see a lot of times. So that was my case. And he goes, yeah, like if you actually put this into some packages for people as a service, then people could hire you because really what you're doing is storytelling and marketing. And all of a sudden the light bulb was like, oh. huh. So I kind of left that 15 minutes having my mind completely shifted. And I left that event going, okay, what would this look like? How could I put this into a package where someone could hire me to do this? And so from there, honestly, I needed to put some more reps in. I needed to do some stuff. So a lot of the early days was the barter system. It was, hey, let me come to your event for free. Give me a seat at the table with like the inside people. So I want access to the speakers. I want access to backstage and all the things, whatever. And I will do the stuff and I will give you the sketches and you can promote the event while it's going on social media, all those kind of things. And what ended up happening, it was great because it got me in the room with other people who were going to other events. And it got me in the room full of people who were like the people who everybody wanted to get some time with and have their attention. And so that was a very valuable thing for me to do, especially in the beginning, because it started forming some relationships. It also gave me proximity to people so I could ask more questions, figure out what the true value was, and continue to shape this thing as a service. And I love it because it's me sitting there experiencing something, like I said before, creating something of what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, and then it's letting other people have a little window into here's what we're doing at this event. Here's who's here. Here's what's happening. And when it's shared on social media, people can be a part of that. Even if they're not at the event, they can have a little FOMO where they're like, oh man, I really wish I was there. Look what's happening. And it's different enough where it's not just simply another slick video or slick photography that people will just pass by real quickly. And, you know, typically people are like, hey, I want to keep this. I want this hanging around because this is a cool momentum, to your point, sharing it with other people, right? So there's a little bit of like viral thing that can happen in there too sometimes. So after realizing, oh, okay, there is tremendous value here, really being intentional on that and going, okay, I have a separate website for that. I have a separate, everything so that I can go and sketch these events and bring that skill set there. And now what I've done also is coupled that with speaking and saying, hey, if somebody's running an event and they want me to come in and sketch and it's appropriate subject matter, I can say also, hey, I'm going to be there sketching. You've hired me to do this. Why don't we talk about an additional thing where I can come and speak maybe at a reduced rate or something or a combo package and there can be even more value brought since I'll already be there. So it's been a great experience and I really love doing it because it always opens up more opportunities and more connections with people.
Yeah, it's very cool. And like I said, it's super cool. I mean, the first time I saw it was at Justin's event, and again, I was like, man, this is really, really cool. So it is, and it's an incredible concept. And like, you know, I've yet to hear anyone say, I wish Mike would not have sketched me at that event, you know? Like everyone,
Sometimes sometimes I do have people who are like, hey, if I slip you an extra 20, can you like take some pounds off
yeah,
me or can you
yeah,
like
yeah. Can
stuff
you
like
take
that?
20 pounds off me
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
remove some of the gray hair and
Yeah.
yeah, that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
no, it is. I mean, it's really cool that you do that, and yeah, it's like I said, just super super cool. So again, want to shift again a little bit here and talk about you've just recently relocated to Tennessee, and you know I think a little bit of similarities there. I mean, you didn't sell everything and jump in an RV like Sandy and I did several years ago, but obviously a new chapter and a big change, and oftentimes can be a scary change. Now, you were going to a spot where you had some friends there, uh, and
Yeah.
soul family, so to speak. Um, but what were some of the hesitations on your side of making that move and some of the fears, and how did you overcome them and finally pull the trigger and say, yep, I'm doing this?
Yeah. Um, there's a lot of factors that were at play. For one, I went through a pandemic divorce, and that while the world was upside down, my personal world was also upside down. And I was thinking that coming out of that was going to be the best time for me to make the move. And it ended up not being the case because my two daughters and wanting them to get to a place where they were a little bit more established and in a direction and trajectory and had some things taken care of. And so I decided to delay my moving here for them and just to kind of give us some more time together before they kind of flew the nest, so to speak. And extremely grateful I had the opportunity to do that. And I think that was by far the best decision ever. But of course, that when I said I was going to move, I was like, well, you can come with me. But, of course, they've got friends and things and whatnot. And they're like, no, we don't want to go. And so moving away from them and also my family, that's all there. I mean, I lived in what I call the Northeast Bermuda Triangle for forever. It was Staten Island, New York, and then it was Long Island, then it was New Jersey. And I just never broke free from there, even in times when I thought I would. But when last year came around, and I was like, this is now the right time. Because some things seemed to fall into place, and some time had taken care of some things, and while that was still now okay, practically speaking, on that side, I was in the clear. I still had like what you said of going like, okay, is this really like this is a big move? Like this is pack everything up in a truck and go and you know, yeah, I know some people, but seeing people once, twice, three times a year is different than living in proximity where people are busy.
Right.
You're not going to necessarily see everybody every day.
Right.
You're not going to have the support system that you normally have. Some of those things were concerns. But I think ultimately, every time I had visited, there was this sense of like, this place gets me. It's full of dreamers. It's full of people pursuing something creatively. There are opportunities that happen organically. There's an openness to things as far as what I do and people connecting and not simply just going, cool, great that you do that, but I don't have a use for you. Like I don't know what to do with you. Because where I came from was so much in traditional jobs that people, again, it was not really it was closing down as opposed to opening up.
Right.
And so those things made it easier for me to make the move. And certainly there's moving and coming to a place, getting reestablished, figuring out what are the norms. What's my because I work for myself too. I don't go to an office. There's no schedule of like, here's what you do, here's where clock in, clock out, here's the people you see every day. So that adds a layer to also of like, how do I do this in such a way that I'm creating those things for myself, going to certain coffee shops on certain days or having my own schedule of things that works for here as opposed to what it looked like when I was there.
Right.
So I think all those things, some of them you don't know until you're in something and you go, well, I've made the decision and now I need to do the best of what I have around me. And give yourself time and space to be able to unpack those things and know that that's a process too. But I think the initial let's go, it was me looking last year going, I'm putting a date on the calendar and I'm looking at that like a physical calendar and I'm looking at that and then I'm backing up from that saying, well, if I'm really moving this day, then 2 weeks before that, this needs to happen. A month before that, this needs to happen. And so all of last year felt like it was all barreling towards my move date where, I pretty much just packed stuff up in a truck and drove it myself and arrived here and was like, okay, everything I own is in this truck. And now what do I do with it? Which also makes you feel like, oh, I really don't want things anymore because I have
Yeah.
too
Oh yeah.
much.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. We can relate to that for sure. And again, a lot of those things we don't have anymore because, we weren't
yeah,
just, loading up a truck to go to another house. I mean, we're,
right.
taking 3,500 square feet of stuff and, fitting it into a 300 square foot space, not even 300 square foot when it comes right down to it. And I mean, for me, it was very I never would have thought I would have said this in my life. It was very liberating as we were getting rid of some of that stuff because you really do. And until you start packing that stuff up, you don't realize what you have, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
because most of it, it just ends up sitting there. I mean, you had the option of take it with, you know, get rid of it. We did to an extent as well, but we had a lot smaller of a list of what could stay on the take it with list
Right. Yes.
than the get rid of it list.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it does make you understand how we get so caught up in things, and most of them don't really mean a whole lot. I mean, we still have at our, one daughter's house, a couple boxes, some photos and stuff like that, are sentimental that you just don't want to get rid of. And at some point we'll probably convert them to digital and go from there. But yeah, you really do get a different perspective when you're loading that stuff up and making a move. And I love how, you kind of set a date, where it was like, okay, this is real now. And that was,
Yeah.
similar to us. It was like when we, put the for sale sign in the yard. Like that was okay. You know, this is it. Like we initially met with our real estate agent, as like a preliminary meeting and thinking that we would, list the house, a month or two down the road. And after that meeting, my wife and I talked and it was like, what are we waiting for anyway? Like we're doing this anyway. I mean, worst thing
Right.
that happens is, we get an offer sooner than we think, and we make an adjustment. As it turned out, the opposite happened is we put the for sale sign in the yard, and then a little while later, the world shut down.
Yeah.
And we took the house off the market, bought the RV, had the RV sitting in the yard, waiting for the market to open up again. And but again, the timing, in retrospect, you look at it and it all worked out the way it was supposed to work out. And I think if you just trust that process, um, you understand that everything happens for a reason, and it's going the way it should. I mean, like you said, you
Yeah.
initially thought that the time would be a couple years ago, but then, you know, as you worked through it and you can look back now and you're like, no, that was the right time to make that move. But I think once you
Yeah.
finally kind of take that leap and set that date and circle that date on the calendar like you did, that's when it makes it real and puts things into motion. Because until you do that, you'll talk yourself out of it.
Hmm.
Like, no, I don't should September, maybe it should be October.
Yeah.
Oh, October, maybe it should be November. Oh, maybe it should be after the holidays.
Right.
So you just got to take the leap at one point or another. So, Mike, we've talked about a lot of different things, and we could certainly go on and on. But is there anything that we missed that you think would be important to the listeners before we start to wrap things up?
I mean, because I do a lot of different things, I'm sure, yeah, that there probably are a bunch of things threads we could pull on. One thing I will say, I think, is if anyone is looking to have a better, more joyful, fun experience of things, especially these days, I did author a book called Make Fun a Habit, and exploring life of going, things start to get real practical, real responsible, along with, this whole, oh, like it's pretty dark days. And going somewhere up the fun and up and left the building and going, how do I recapture that? How can I recapture that? What does that look like? And so I wrote this book kind of as a response to that question for myself first and foremost, and then offering it to others to go, fun enjoyment really is what's underneath that word fun. Don't let that trip people up, because some people hear fun and they think like clown noses and confetti. And I'm like, if that's your brand of fun, then rock on,
Right,
cool. But
right.
I don't want that to be a detractor from someone who's like, that's undignified. I would never, the point is enjoyment. And are we enjoying our lives and
Yeah,
the work that we do and how we're spending our days? And even when we have tasks and things that are not enjoyable, is it possible to find some things in it that are fun, change our outlook, our mindset, and our attitude? So that was all what went into this book called Make Fun a Habit, and that's available on Amazon or my website as well. So if someone's looking for a resource, I would just love to be able to provide that for people.
absolutely. So, Mike, how do people, you just talked about that book in particular, but if someone wants to reach out to you just about, you know, sketching live events or, you know, talked about creativity or any of those things, like what's the best way for them to connect with you out there on the web?
The my main website, which is mikebrennan.me, me, that will give you links out to if you're interested in some of the other things that we talked about and even some things we didn't talk about. That's kind of the hub of all things. Specifically speaking, if someone's heard about live event sketching, if you go to eventsketches.com, that will bring you to a site that's dedicated just to the event sketch stuff. And I'm active on social media as well. Instagram, I'm at Mike Bone, and on Facebook a lot as well too. So always happy to connect with people. Always happy to see how I can encourage them to embrace their own creativity.
I love it. Love it. So, Mike, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, and that comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that Mike does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
Every day I create something, and there are days where I have things that go sideways, and everybody is like, it's hard for me to carve out time to create. I learned early on that small daily deposits make huge differences and impacts. And so instead of waiting for an hour or 2 hours, an afternoon, a weekend where I could be dedicated to doing something where I feel like I need a bigger project, I need, everything has to be big, 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 flipping the script and saying, no, actually small is better. Because if I can show up for 10, 15, 20 minutes a day and do something towards my creativity and keep at it, that cumulative effect will have more impact than waiting for those large blocks of time. So I've learned that over the years. That's been a big part of my story and journey, and I encourage other people to do that too. To value small, start small, and especially when it comes to creating, because then it gives you a way in, and then once you have your way in, it can grow from there. And as I'm creating these things every day, I'm putting it out into the world. And so, just like what I've said, all along, I really want to create things that are meaningful to me as something based on an experience I have, and then help other people have an experience around that and bring some joy, bring some benefit, bring some value to their lives as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact, start small. You can think big, but if you start small, it's an easier path to get there for sure. So I love that advice. Great advice for sure. Mike, this is a great conversation. For everybody out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, check out our Pay It Forward program. You can buy a copy of one of my books, and Sandy and I will donate it somewhere along the way. Mike, again, great conversation. Look forward to connecting when we're heading through Tennessee. Maybe we can grab some time together as we're heading out there. But really great conversation. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. Thank you, Dan.
You bet.